Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Patrick. I see some familiar names here. How's everybody doing today? Give me a quick what's up in the chat. Just saw a couple of you guys logging in. How's everybody doing? Shelby and Justine are joining me today. Good, great, Maria. How many of us have our test coming up sometime within the next few days here? Are some of you guys testing for the April test date? I would assume. We got a nice full 5 review here with Psych and Social. Lots of good stuff. Don't worry, there's still time to still see that improvement in your score. That's really what this is all about with our full-length review sessions. So I want you guys to sit back, buckle up, enjoy the ride. So full-length 5 with Psych and Soc. I always start off my full-length reviews, and I want to ask you guys a question. How do you like the Psych-Soc section? Good, bad, maybe indifferent? How do you guys feel about it? We got a smaller group here today, so don't be afraid to use the chat. I want to make sure you guys leave here with all this good information. I want to hear from you. We're to make this as interactive as possible during the next hour for our Psych Social review. You really like it, Maria? Marius, how about you? You like Psych Social? How's anybody felt during the research full lengths that their testing endurance starts to get a little bit lower, or maybe you start to get a little bit more tired by the time you get to the end? Yeah, and I think that's kind of a common thing that a lot of people mention about the psych-social section is that when you get to the end of it, usually you're a little bit tired. There's a lot of stuff going on. Remember, MCAT 2015 is almost 7 hours, which you're going to be in the testing. So what you want to do is we want to look for as many tips and tricks and shortcuts along the way to make this as an efficient section as possible, because sometimes your energy levels are a little bit lower towards the end of the test. So in this MCAT channel episode, what we're really going to be focusing on is showing you guys how to get answers quickly to the psych section. So you want to match a psychological, sociological scenario in the question stem to its term and the answer choices. So this entire channel session is completely designed to revolve around certain questions within the psych section from full length 5. So if you haven't taken full length 5 yet, I definitely recommend to hold off on this session, and you guys can always watch it again in the archives, and then come back and review this in the same manner. That way you guys are kind of using it to your advantage, because one of the things that I always tell people is you want to make mistakes now. Because if you make mistakes now, when do you not make mistakes later? Sounds like a really funny question, but I always make a point. Exactly. You're not going to make mistakes in the test. So if anything, even if you guys are taking that April test date, which is just a few days here, you really want to make sure that when you guys are going back through and reviewing, you're looking for those patterns, those question stems that you'll see over and over again. It really gives you a huge advantage on test day to matching more correct answer choices. Remember, one of the best things that you guys can remember about this is that just by answering a few more questions correct, if you bump yourself up 1 or 2 scaled score points, you're leapfrogging yourself past thousands of applicants in the application process. And that is a huge advantage to you, because like we say here at Kaplan, scores open doors at the end of the day. So even if you guys are taking the test in April, there is still plenty of time. You guys still have some days here where you can still pick up on those last little areas of opportunity, which is going to be a huge advantage when you guys step into that testing center. So don't lose hope. Don't lose that motivation. The hard work is going to pay off. So let's check out how we can see this payoff in full length 5. So learning goal number 1, we're going to match a psychological or sociological scenario in the question stem to its term and the answer choices. So it's funny because one of the times that I taught this lesson last, someone made a really interesting comment in the chat, and they said, Pat, of all the questions that we're going through right now, none of this is conceptually that difficult. And you're right. Anything that we're doing here, learning goal number 1, is not necessarily overly conceptually difficult. What is one of the biggest challenges with the psych section? And this is actually one of your biggest opportunities going into these April test dates and then beyond to be able to score some easy points. What do you guys find is the biggest challenge in the psych section? So Maria, Laris, what do you guys think? You guys are the ones in chat. I see a couple more of you guys in here. Paige, Zakaria, Alexander. What do you guys find to be the biggest challenge in the psych section, or even just going back through and studying for it? Vocab. I'm so happy that you just said that, because think about it. You ever get to some questions in the psych section where it's kind of like you know it or you don't? Anyone feel that way? I'm gonna be honest. When I was going back through and reviewing for the psych section, that was one of my biggest hangups. Okay, so what we want you guys to be thinking about during this entire lesson is actually one of the most time efficient ways for you guys to continue to see improvement. Yeah, is not necessarily going back to these review notes, but actually just going through as many questions as you can. So utilizing the Q bank, the passage-based questions, and then your sections on the full length, and literally just going back through and making a list. So as I tell everybody here, when we had to go back through MCAT, prep for MCAT 2015, I had not looked at psych for a little while. So this is actually really fresh in my mind because I actually struggle with certain parts of this too. You guys are probably laughing, but you're thinking, yeah, right, Pat, but you're a Kaplan instructor. It just comes easy. It doesn't come easy. We're not up here. We're not robots. We have to work on it too. One of the things that I found is literally going through this strategy. So when I go back and I teach this, I almost laugh to myself because this is exactly what I had to do. Shelby and Justine will agree with you. It's just a volume of material with this vocab. So watch how we can go through. We're still going to identify the pattern. We're still going to define the answer choices, but we can match quickly to the correct answer. So how many of you guys might even remember a question like number 3 here? But check out 3. All 4 answer choices are just what? What were all 4 answer choices here? What are those? Yeah, they're super similar. Aren't they all just definitions that was in our book anyway? So if those are all just simple definitions, the best and most efficient way for you guys to go back through your questions that you just did, make a list. Whether you write it on a piece of paper, you put it in your cell phone under the notes tab, or you just start making a list on like a Google Doc, that way you can go through. Now, if you really feel like you're stuck, one of the things that I'm recommending to students all the time, which is actually having a lot of success, is even though you have the Kaplan flashcards, sometimes just going back through your questions off of your Kaplan full-length exams and making flashcards off these definitions is a surefire way to be able to pick up that information really quickly. Because the process of actually making those flashcards is huge. Check out a question like number 3 here. I almost know just by looking at my answer choices, and you'll see this for a bunch of them that we're going to look at here today, is that it says later analysis revealed that males had lower accuracy for reverse images such as snakes, spiders, and images of death than their female counterparts across all ages. But before I even read that during the test, I knew that I had 4 answer choices that were all just rote definitions. So think about it. Peer pressure, group polarization, groupthink, socialization. Literally, I can go through this process and just basically recall my definitions and match to a quick answer choice. Which one, based upon these definitions, seems like a more likely fit? Think about it. Take a quick look at the definitions we just put up on the screen if you have to. But isn't this just become a matching exercise as long as we know the definitions? See some of you guys typing, don't be shy. Which one do you guys think is a better fit here? Think about it. It says males had a lower accuracy. All right, socialization, process of developing and spreading norms, customs, and beliefs. So Paige, when we think about that then, if you go back, you could reference the passage a little bit because furthermore, according to this hypothesis, both children and adults would remember reverse images with better accuracy than neutral images. So it was those aversive images that really was the key in that question stem. What you should lead you to, just like Paige just mentioned in the chat, very good, was socialization. It's that process of developing and spreading the norms. Now here's my question. Did you have to go back to the passage in a question like this? Did you have to? No, you definitely did not. Again, this is a question, and it's like kind of you either know it or you don't. But this is some of the great stuff because you can still pick up a lot of this information between now and these April test dates. So think about this process as we work through. Now you'll see we picked specifically a few questions during this channel session that are going to bring up a lot of these definitions over and over again. One of the best things that you guys can do as we're going through class today is literally just start writing down the definitions. Now check out number 7. I still see 4 basic definitions here. So I can go back all the way. Well, think about it. Foraging behavior, searching for food. I mean, that's a pretty easy one to be able to identify. Impression management, behaviors tend to influence the perceptions of others, okay? And then inclusive fitness, a theory for evolution and social behavior. Again, lots of definitions, but let's take a look at the questions now. An astute researcher noticed that when participants were left alone at the buffet, that tended to eat higher calorie foods than when a group of people were present, which of the following processes may have been at work. Okay. Well, just to review real quick, let's go back to groupthink. Groupthink was just tendency for groups to make decisions based on ideas that rise within a group without considering outside ideas. But when we go through this, which one do you guys think is a better fit if you're more self-conscious about the amount of food that you would eat around other people? Maria saying it's choice B. Isn't that just impression management right there? If behaviors intended to influence the perceptions of others. Literally what that is, left alone at the buffet versus whether a group of people were present. You're absolutely correct. It has to be answer choice B because you're becoming impressed upon by a group of people. Again, did I use any information from the passage here? Would I have to use any information from the passage? Definitely not. Good. Easy points to pick up. It's kind of you either know it or you don't. Now, 31. This was something that I actually used to flip-flop in my head quite a bit. Does anybody get confused when they see top-down and bottom-up processing? This is just a quick tip for you. Anyone ever get those two mixed up? I always mix them up for some reason because I would just think about them flipped in my head. So here's the catch with this. If you see the ability of the visual cortex to organize elements into groups or unified wholes even with incomplete information can be explained by the concept of what? Now, before I even read that question stem when I took this, I would look at these four answer choices and I'd say to myself, okay, let's make sure that we really get the top down versus bottom up. Top down, instead of always thinking of it as top down, this is going to sound kind of weird, but it always really helped me. Think of it as like big picture. So like top down, big picture down, like the trickle down effect. So that way, if I was thinking big picture, I was thinking it has to be concept driven, right? It has to be the big picture and then goes down through without analyzing specific parts of it, okay? But bottom up, I need all the little bitty nitty gritty pieces to really come up and determine what that object is. So that would be data driven. Now it says the ability of the visual cortex to organize elements into groups or unified wholes even with incomplete information. Now, does that necessarily fit either A or B? Or would we want to still look at C or D? Yeah, I'm not like in love with it, even if you couldn't exactly remember what it was. But when going back to it, I also remember Gestalt's principles. And that really was the inference of missing parts. Remember, an inference is an unstated what? If you're to infer something, what is an inference? It's your unstated, remember from the cars section, making you guys think here. Alexander, very good, buddy. It's conclusion. Well, it's conclusion, right? So if you have to make a conclusion based upon something without all of the information, boom, that's fitting Gestalt's principles very, very well. Answer choice C. Good. Again, the process of your definitions here. Now, kinesthetic sense, the ability to tell where one's body is in space. All right, that was a goofy one for me. For some reason, I always think like kinetics, but that's not what it is at all. It's your like your proprioception of your body. Any of you guys can close your eyes, right? Can I still touch my nose? When I think about it, I can still touch my nose, right? Now you guys are all probably doing. Imagine you behind your computer thinking, close my eyes, like trying to touch my nose. But yeah, all right. It's the ability to tell where one's body is in space. So that's kind of that idea of you can feel where you are three-dimensionally. Okay. Again, if you struggle with this, and I'm going to try to throw a lot of tips in during today's channel session, specifically on how to remember these definitions, try to think of examples. It's a really good way, like a fail-safe, that if you get into the test, you're like, what was Gestalt's principle? So you got to be able to go back and think, okay, how could you infer that missing part? We do that a lot with pictures, right? You obviously, so oftentimes cannot visualize the complete picture, but if you see certain things, it usually jogs your memory to be able to see it again. So it sounds bizarre, but it's a good memory mnemonic for you to use to try to remember these definitions. So let's take a look at another one here. So we have Gestalt's principles again. Here's one thing to be weary of. If you're in the psych section, is it going to be a very common occurrence if you have questions in the same passage that they would ask you about the Gestalt principle, like 2 questions in one passage? Do you think that would be very common from like a test making perspective? If you were an MCAT test writer, would you do that? Probably not. So when you get into different questions, try to remember the relationship between all these concepts. So let's take a look at 11. Individuals who begin to eat spicy foods early on in life can tolerate much spicier food as adults than those who have never been exposed. Okay, well, again, we're looking at this pattern because it's still definitions in all my answer choices. So here's a few of them. Sensory adaptation, okay, is the one that I would immediately start to think of, because if you can tolerate spicier food, you're adapting to that sense. Think about it. When you put your pants on in the morning, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time, right? You guys ever heard that expression? Do you necessarily feel your pants on your legs all day? Well, now you guys are probably laughing because you're sitting there at your computer being like, well, now I can feel my pants because you just said it. Isn't that psychological? Yeah, that is psychological. But no, you don't like necessarily sit there and think, okay, my pants are touching my leg. That's the idea of sensory adaptation. It's the ability of sensory receptors to reduce the response to that stimuli. But remember, quick bio connection here, can you actually increase the strength of your action potentials? Just quick recall. Can you increase the strength? No. Good job, Emily. The only thing you can do is increase the frequency. So that, in a way, is where we're talking about sensory adaptation. Very good. Weber's law is a good one. It's a theory of perception. You notice the difference. It means there's a constant ratio between the stimulus magnitude and original stimulus magnitude. I always think of Weber's law in a way is like if you were to poke or push your face, right? And then if somebody were to come around and sucker punch you in the face, I always like to think of really extreme examples because it helps me think about it in the back of my mind. Well, if you do that, there has to be a ratio between that original stimulus magnitude and then that pain perception if you were to be struck in the face. Signal detection theory, the internal and external context, both play a role in perceiving stimuli. So this is kind of combined with that pain idea. Now, if you took me, Justine, and Shelby, and we all had to sit, let's say, in an ice bath of 20 degrees, or not an ice bath of 20 degrees, but like 40 degrees, right? If it was a 40 degrees, would we all necessarily have the exact same pain sensitivity to it? Again, extreme examples. No. So the internal and external context. So let's say Shelby is a big runner and takes a lot of ice baths. She's going to be more prone to it because of the internal and the external being the ice bath, with the internal remembering those ice baths. She's going to have a higher pain tolerance to it. So that detection theory is kind of that memory behind it. Nominal Gestalt principles again. Okay. Again, think of lots of examples here. A lot of people brush off psych from that perspective, but this is actually a huge opportunity for you guys to pick up some easy points. And then again, remember, if you go up a couple more questions correct, you go up another scaled score point, you're literally leapfrogging past thousands of applicants in this application process. Remember what we're here for. Points is the name of the game. MCAT doesn't care if you show your work. We just got to know that information. Okay? So how would I word the question, Weber's law? That's a great question. It'd have to give you something, because if it's a theory of perception, to notice the difference, and it's the ratio between the original stimulus and then that new stimulus, or the heat stimulus magnitude, there would have to be two different stimuluses presented in the question stem. Does that make sense? So if you're looking at it, there has to be some sort of extreme stimulus that's going to kind of, there has to be something extra. They have to give you some sort of new information saying that that would be the case. So oftentimes you just get an increase in magnitude of a particular stimulus. A good example of that would be if you, for example, were, what's a good one? Oh, a great one. You ever hear about the idea if you can touch like the back of a door, right? If you're in they always tell you this in fire safety classes. If you ever happen to be in a burning building, what are you not supposed to touch doorknobs with? What are you not supposed to touch doorknobs with? Your palm, because if you touch the doorknob when it's hot, you do the grasp thing real quick. So that's why you do it on the back. The idea then is if you were to have a warm one, you wouldn't clench as much. But if you had a really, really hot thing, you'd clench even more really quickly because of the increase in that stimulus. So it's the theory of perception. That was a little bit harder to word a question on just because it's a theory behind why we perceive differences in that stimulus. They have to give you two different stimuluses in order for it to be related to Weber's law. Now, on to 47. Anyone remember 47? by chance? I got this wrong the first time. Anyone remember this from full length 5? It's a weird question because I think there's 2 answer choices that seem tempting here. Okay? Anyone happen to be a little frustrated with this one? I was the first go around. So it says a woman is on a diet, but she experienced a moment of weakness and ate a donut. Okay? She feels guilty about breaking her diet, so she decides to spend an extra 30 minutes at the gym. Her behavior can be attributed to which of the following processes? Now let me show you these 4 definitions. Okay. In this case, what do you guys associate classical conditioning with? I mean, that's the one you always think of the dog, right? What do we do with Pavlov's dog? What ended up ultimately causing the dog to salivate? The bell, right? You ring the bell and they kept feeding the dog, and after a while they wouldn't feed the dog, but if you ring the bell right before you feed it, it starts to continue to salivate. Is this really classical conditioning then? Probably not. So that was probably the easiest one to eliminate first. Okay. Now, cognitive dissonance theory is simultaneous presence of 2 opposing thoughts can lead to stress of one's beliefs. Right. Now, is there really 2 opposing thoughts here? Kind of. So this is where I'm kind of thinking, all right, well, what do we mean? But if we go to drive reduction, internal drives motivate people so that they attempt to reduce or eliminate a driving factor. And then social loafing. People exert less effort to achieve a goal and work in a group. Is this social loafing? No, not really. I mean, I don't have any less of a desire. You know, if you wrote about like a group of people that wanted to go on a diet and they all worked at it together, and there had to be a cumulative weight loss goal, maybe some people wouldn't work as hard because they knew everyone else was losing weight too. That's not the case here. So here's the thing. Originally, if you think a woman is on her diet but she experienced a moment of weakness and ate a donut, and that was the end of it, well, then I'm kind of all over the place. But this extra information, she felt guilty about it. That has to be cognitive dissonance because it's a simultaneous presence of 2 opposing thoughts. I like B too, but here's the thing with drive reduction. What has to be out of this question stem in order for it to be drive reduction? What would have to not be part of this question stem in order for B to be correct? Think about it. If you just ate the donut and you were supposed to be on the diet, then we could attribute that to drive reduction. I wasn't as driven to motivate to my diet because I was hungry, so I ate the donut. But we're saying this woman felt guilty about breaking her diet, so then she decided to spend an extra 30 minutes on the gym. Sicaria, very good. Laris, does that make sense? I wanted to pick B here too. This is the one that tripped me up. So good. Again, guys, definitions is going to be key to success here. I can't tell you often enough. There's so many nice, quick points to be able to pick up. It's such even for those of you guys taking the April test dates, and I'll say this 10 more times during today's session, don't quit now. The hard work pays off, especially in the psych section. Okay, 12. Notice we've covered a lot of these theories so far. So let's put it up real quick. All right, we talked about cognitive dissonance, the drive reduction theory. Incentive theory, that's like you're motivated to action by external goals, right? Such as money. So oftentimes people might attribute the workplace to this, right? You know, you work for some sort of reward, and then operative conditioning, a form of associative learning, reinforcement, and punishment to change those behaviors. So here's the thing. Let's look for our context clues within the question stem. Still same pattern as before. A woman walks outside one morning without checking the weather report. She immediately feels the snap of cold on her cheeks. Shivering, she rushes back inside and seeks her warmest cloak. Which of the following theories best explains this behavior? Think about it. What is she responding to? Exactly. She's responding to the cold. Right? Very good. So if she's responding to the cold, what theory is that really then? Aren't we trying to reduce some sort of stimulus? Very good. It's got to be, Maria. Excellent. Drive reduction theory. Answer choice A. Excellent job, guys. So, a couple more here. 20. Now, I'm going to show you guys the 4 definitions again. so that you guys have this and can take a quick look if you've forgotten any of them. But I want you to look at this question this time here. There's a big clue. And as soon as you see that clue, it's actually a really quick one to pick up. The Eagles, viewing themselves as proper and moral, contributed many of their victories during the second week to the fact that they rarely swore, while the Rattlers, who viewed themselves as rough and tough, cussed profusely. I think it's kind of a funny question. If you cuss more, then what happened? This is an example of what? Okay, is it a stereotype? That's the first one that I would look at. Is it a stereotype? Nah, I don't. I mean, the attitude's based on limited superficial information. Not really. Now, if you look at that self-serving bias, individuals will view personal successes as skill and failures and as bad luck. It's not personal successes, though, as bad luck. There's no talk about luck here. Now, self-fulfilling prophecy, if someone just believes, right, they create conditions for that stereotype, and they believe that it's going to happen, maybe. But this is a better fitting for our fundamental attribution error. There's a bias towards attributions rather than situational when looking at it. They viewed themselves as proper and moral, contributing many of their victories during the second week to the fact that they really swore. While the Raiders viewed themselves as rough and tough and cussed profusely, that's probably not going to have that much of an effect on the actual victory or success. Good. Okay. So kind of a weird one with 20, but really think about your overall definitions and the context clues that you have there. Okay. Now, 27. Okay. In 27, it says, Zakaria, yeah, you could have something related to the just world hypothesis in a question stem like this, but their fundamental attribution error, they're falsely attributing their victory to something on the inside, that they're proper and moral. So in a case, you could probably use the situation to just world hypothesis in a way that, since the question's not asking that, don't think that way. So this is why when we're looking at the pattern, you always want to go back to the question answer choices to kind of use that to keep your focus throughout the question. That's a really good question, a really good point to bring up, though. So you can see how sometimes multiple situations will actually tend to, or could tend to ask you things in different ways. It's a good question. Now, anyone happen to remember 27? 27 is more of a passage based here, okay? And I'm talking about different techniques, right? Indirect therapy enables family members to help a person needing treatment. Environmental modification kind of self-describes itself. Errorless learning, errors are not necessary for learning to occur. That's Skinner's theory, which is good to remember. And then modeling, the watching and imitating. So if it says which of the following learning techniques was employed in the intervention described in the passage, this is a question where you want to cut and run, okay? So sometimes you'll hear us say that, especially on the channel and then in classes. What we mean by cut and run is know your definition, and as soon as you see something, after teaching the 8 features, the instructor described 10 household objects using the features. Participants were then given time to describe the objects. Well, if you think about it then, that's just modeling. They were watching and then imitating someone else. Exactly. Cut and run. None of the other things work here. It's not errorless learning. It's not we're not modifying anything from the environment or changing elements of the environment. It's not indirect therapy. There's no mention of family members helping a person. So if you know something this quick, get out of it. It's a quick point to score, and you can spend more time on something later on. So look, I'm going to do the same thing in 30 here. This is a great example of one, but actually the next 2 questions you'll see are great examples of ones where you just want to get in, get some quick points, and move on. So look, 30. Some research has shown that individuals who suffer depression report feeling that they have bad luck and that bad things always seem to happen to them. Well, based on this finding, individuals with depression would be expected to score poorly in measures of which of the following traits. So I look at this and immediately I'm thinking to myself, bad luck, bad things always happen to them if they're depressed. That's got to be that locus of control. It's a source of influence. If you go around and you have that black cloud on your head all the time, you start to think bad things will happen to you. Okay? It's not self-efficacy. You don't see oneself as capable. Neuroticism, emotional and stressful situations. even though we all probably are to a point that has to be extreme. And then self-esteem, feelings of self-worth. This isn't self-esteem here. If anything, you're losing that self-esteem overall. Quick point, score it, move on. Again, 33. This is one of my favorite questions from this section. After reviewing this study, a clinician wants to implement cognitive therapy to improve the social functioning of individuals with severe schizophrenia. Which of the following should the clinician be most concerned with them when implementing the results of the study? If it's schizophrenia, do a lot of people within the population have schizophrenia? It's a really simple question to ask yourself. Maria says no. You're absolutely right. No. So if you go through what that actually ends up being, it has to be generalizability. You can't take something extrapolated from people who are schizophrenic and then implement it for the rest of the population. It just doesn't carry over that way. Now, some people mistakenly might choose what other answer choice here? What would be a common wrong answer choice for 33? Yeah, A or C. Those are the two that tend to happen. It's not necessarily a bad study. It's just that observer's bias, the observer knows the goals of the study and allows them to influence observations. But it says a clinician wants to go through this. There's no hint that it was biased towards something. Okay? Now, if you see selection bias, okay, it's not selection bias because you're specifically focusing on people with severe schizophrenia. Okay? So just think about the literal wording of what's happening there. 38. Okay, again, another type of question. Boom, 4 things here. Let's jump right into the question and see what's happening. A later study revealed that white participants were more likely to experience anxiety when the conversation involved a discussion about race discrimination. Which of the following processes is most likely to be at work? Now, I know immediately this is most likely not going to be the self-fulfilling prophecy. Attribution, a process for explaining causes of events and behavior. Tempting, but I don't know. So I'm looking at A and C here, and I'm thinking anxiety and discussion about race discrimination. That's got to be related to the stereotype. Okay? Ethnocentrism, practice of judging other cultures based on values and beliefs of own culture. Are the people that they're referring to here judging the other culture, though? Are they literally judging the other culture? Is there anything in the question them to suggest that they're passing judgment? No. So you have to take, again, the literal interpretation of the question stem. And I know that's tough, but what we're really trying to show you and why we picked the questions that we did here is because it's related specifically to the definitions. It kind of becomes an all or nothing. Cut and run, know your definitions, score easy points here. Okay? 34. Okay. Show you guys the definitions here. We've covered a lot of these so far. We've covered all of them so far. And it says a technician for the passage's study is perturbed when a participant yells at her after their PDA breaks. The technician does not understand why the participant was so upset and concludes the participant must be emotionally volatile. Which of the following best explains her line of reasoning? Okay, so at first when I read this, I thought to myself, wait, what is being asked here? But whose line of reasoning are we talking about? Or are we referring to? Okay, so the line of reasoning, if the participant, and they're telling you, concluding the participant must be emotionally volatile, it's got to be the technician. Very good, Maria. So if the participant must be emotionally volatile, then what are we really referring to? This has to be answer choice D. Because think, aren't they emotionally volatile? Or the line of reasoning is they're emotionally volatile for what reason? It's disproportional attributions when looking at others. That's the only answer choice that's talking about a relationship between one observing the other. Okay, good. 34 is D. 37. We have 4 different approaches here. This, again, is a definition question. You see 37, it says, the researchers conducting the study described in the passage assert that actions are shaped by self-image and circumstances at the time of the action. Which of these approaches to human interaction would the researchers be most likely to agree with? All right, let me ask a different question here. What are we focusing on within this question stem? What is my clue within this question stem? Self-image, right? Actions are shaped by self-image and circumstances at the time of the action. Well, which one of this you really think about has to be focused on shape of your self-image? Okay, yeah, dramatical approach. Renke, very, very good. I think in this, sometimes people jump the gun here. It's not developmental because it's not we're not referring to age. The residual approach, the physical appearance, right? But that's not necessarily what we're saying here. It's by the self-image. So inside, we view ourselves as actors on a stage, how elaborate it is. Good. And it's not Freudian. There's no subconscious internal states motivated each other. Good. Now, 52. A prediction that the acquisition of new knowledge evokes a latent urge. What does the word latent mean again? As we bring up our 4 definitions here. What does latent mean? Latent urge. So if we have new knowledge, there's a latent urge to inform others of this knowledge because of the past success in sharing novel information best fits with the which define precisely their personality. Yeah, we haven't fully or unintended latent urge. Maybe it was delayed a little bit, but that underlying urge comes back. We want to inform each other's. So what does this best think of? Look what we outlined in red here. Unconscious urges, interact with their surroundings, internal feelings, behaviors, learned reward, and punishment. Well, I know just by looking at this, because of the past success, it would have to be your behaviorist. So Marenki, I will tell you honestly, I chose D when I first did this. It's not psychoanalytical perspective. This is a good mistake to make right here because you won't fall for this again. This is the problem with it. Personality results from unconscious urges. Is this completely unconscious if you have past success and you know of that past success? Does that help? When I first did this question, I picked D. I'll be really honest. Yeah, it's confusing because you have to make sure those little words, but this is the key, guys, and this is why there's so much room for growth in the psych section that you guys can go off and even just a few more days before your exam, you can still pick up really quick points here because just by going through this question now, you're not going to fall for that same trap in a few days down the line. Keep the positive attitude during the psych section. There's so much room for improvement. I can't begin to tell you. Do not lose hope in this section. Okay. Now 41. A couple approaches, a couple perspectives, but it actually gives us the key here. Look at our question stems. A researcher's diagnosis of a psychological disorder based on behavior in specialized circumstances, like those described in the first paragraph, would mean the researcher is inaccurately applying which of the following in his or her assessment. Well, if it's a psychological disorder based upon behavior, is an approach or perspective. I wouldn't say to always do this because I think in a way you could run into a trap, but it at least gives you somewhat. Okay, so Marenke's saying B because I think it's got to be an approach, right? Biomedical is your pathophysiological and pharmaceutical solutions. Psychosocial, that means there's got to be some sort of social cause or environment around it. Trait perspective and behaviors perspective, dispositions. But we would give you the first paragraph here. You would have to go back and kind of review this. Because if you went back to that first paragraph, behavior and environmental factors. So what's the only one that's going to fit if you also include environmental factors within that? Wouldn't you then have to consider the psychological, biological, and social causes? It has to be answered choice B. Very good. Okay, so again, what we're really looking for is that key insight to the last little nitty-gritty parts of that. Okay. Now 45. Stop and think. Okay, I think it's very easy to confuse these. So this is a way to kind of break it down. Anxiety disorder, you have anxiety over something. Okay, you don't know what it is, but you have anxiety because you're uncertain of that future. Okay, so it's kind of weird. You worry or unease or fear. Personality disorder, though, your inflexible patterns of behavior causes distress or impaired function that's based upon you. Okay, now the mood disorder is the one that I was used to mess up. It's disturbance in mood is the underlying feature. Can mood be both psychological and physiological? Can it be physiological? Can your mood be dependent upon your physiological conditions? Yes. In terms of the MCAT, yes. And in terms of psych, yes. Okay. For some reason, I think that's something that is commonly confused. So if you don't have a psych background, remember that mood is not just psychological, it's also physiological. Think about it. If you're really, really hungry, right? I always call it hangry, for example. Can you be hangry and can that lead to a difference in your mood, so to speak? Think of like a Snickers commercial. Yeah, right? I mean, some of you guys be like, I am right now. Okay? Personality disorder, though, and anxiety disorder, that's not necessarily something that's physiological. It's more of a psychological disorder. Now, no definable disorder, especially when you look at psych, some stuff we just simply don't understand why it happens. But if you have difficulties enjoying traditionally enjoyable activities and you have a sense of consistent grief, what are you most likely going to associate that with? Probably a mood disorder. Something is wrong with you right now because if you normally enjoy those things, why are you not enjoying them now? Maybe you just need a Snickers bar and everything will be okay. All right. So it's not anxiety, there's no uncertainty there, and then you're not causing distress or impaired function because of some sort of pattern of behavior. Okay. Good. Excellent, guys. Excellent. That's what you assume. So that's the assumption behind it, Zakaria. So why I say that is if you normally would enjoy those things. So let's say for example, I like really enjoy going to the movies, but I was super pumped to see the Hunger Games come out. I really like that movie, right? But when Hunger Games come out, I really didn't feel well physiologically. I'm probably not going to enjoy that traditionally enjoyable activity of going to a new movie. It has to be based upon something. So that grief or something has got to be based upon some sort of disturbance in your mood. Does that make sense? So that your question actually is a great question to ask because it helps you choose then mood disorder. Does that make sense? Perfect. It's a weird one to think about. That's what always kind of helped me. Just kind of be able to associate it. All right. Now, 48. All right. Man was born in England, grew up eating meat pies and drinking Earl Grey tea all of his life. You guys ever had a meat pie? Really good, by the way. Speaking of food. All right. After moving to Georgia, he began losing his British accent and acquired a taste for fried foods and southern sweet tea. I like fried chicken too, though, so I can't complain. This process, what are you really doing? Well, think about it. We talked about socialization, but you have assimilation, the invigilation, and then social facilitation. This has to be a classic example of assimilation. You're losing some of that British accent, but you're acquiring a taste for something new. All right? Does it necessarily take away from the fact that he's an individual that has self-awareness? No. I mean, just because you like fried chicken instead of meat pies now or prefer it doesn't necessarily mean you're not an individual. And you're not performing at a different level based on the fact that I was around. Social facilitation, is that usually a positive thing or a negative thing for the norm? Social facilitation. Yes, it's usually a positive thing. And if you guys ever feel like when you're working in a study group or a good study group that you seem to retain more information or you have a little bit more energy to get things done, right? Yeah, that's social facilitation. Okay. It's like, for example, if you get up and try to start studying for your MCAT and you're just sitting in your bedroom, but like you have Netflix on your laptop, or you can like go cook yourself a meal instead, you don't really get as much done. But all of a sudden you put yourself in a meeting room with someone else and you're like, okay, someone's looking at me. Let's step that level up a little bit. So it kind of always helps me remember. All right, now we got 51 here. I got a few more questions. I want to make sure we hit them all. All right, this is the last question of learning goal number 1, and then we got some nice stuff to finish up here in learning goal 2. So this is the one, there's one other really thing here. I always forget, if you have power differentials, it's an imbalance in ability of individuals and groups to achieve goals. So there's some sort of differential that's causing you not, okay? and imbalancing the ability of individuals. Symbolic interaction framework for what individuals interact. That one's, I think, pretty self-explanatory. Social constructivism, how groups come to ascribe meaning or value to objects or concepts. Will every group assign the same meaning or value to the same object? No. So you can think religion here, sometimes a psych example that they give for that. So certain religions would attribute certain objects to having a higher value. And lastly, functional analysis. That's the application of operant conditioning to establish relationships and stimuli and responses. Classic stuff here. So take the question stem. Assessing the importance of a new technology by addressing the perception of its social relevance among those exposed to it would most accurately be described as analysis of the process of social construction. How did we ascribe those meanings? You have to think about that individual group. Okay, so what's the main takeaway from learning goal number 1 here, guys? We've picked out a lot of questions here, but it almost kind of showed you the same thing over and over and over again. It's just definitions. You guys can get a few definitions down each day. Boom, that's a lot of quick questions. Yeah, those definitions and concepts, it's nothing that's necessarily conceptually super difficult. You just got to know the definitions to pick up some quick points there. Okay? Excellent job. Excellent job. Now, learning goal number 2. All right? In this section, you'll learn to match a psychological, sociological term in the question stem to its definition and answer choices. We're actually showing you the same thing in learning goal number 2. We're just going opposite. So watch how you see this. It's formulating a definition for the concept being tested, just in a little bit different of a manner. Watch. When we get to question number 4, what's the first thing that sticks out to you in the question stem? I'm not even giving you a second to read it, but you'll see it's going to stick out. Yeah, okay, well, Cannon Bard. Well, if you really look at it, a lot of the rest of that question stem is like blah, 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 blah. What it's asking is what's Cannon Bard theory? Well, that's the theory of emotion, right? It states the stimulus is the first received and then simultaneously processed physiologically and cognitively. Well, if you go through your answer choices, then the only thing that you're really doing is matching. So is this any different from how we have to learn for learning goal number 1? Is this really any different for how we would learn it? No, not really at all. What's different, though, is the way that the question stem is worded. So instead of having 4 concepts driving home your answer choices, they're giving you the concept in the question stem, and you just have to go back through and match. So what's the takeaway here? We're still giving you the same tools. You're going to use your section test, the sections within your full-length exams. You're still going to use your passage-based questions. You're still going to go through your Q bank, and you can still go through your psych review videos. But if you're taking an April test date or a May test date and really gearing up to go quick here, really your most time-effective way to see improvement is not necessarily get caught up on all this mumbo-jumbo. Go back, make your own flashcards, pick up some quick definitions and concepts. Boom, a little MCAT magic goes a long way, and you're picking up some really easy points on the test there. Okay, if anything, you should leave this section fired up, knowing that, hey, this is not that bad of a question because I know that I can just pick up some easy answers to question stems. Take a look at question number 8 here. Okay, number 8 is literally showing you according to the cognitive appraisal theory. Well, what's the definition of cognitive appraisal? It's a subjective evaluation of stress-inducing situation in 2 stages. The evaluation of the environment and the threat, and then once you know that environment and threat, can you deal with it? All right, so if you can deal with the actual stress. So in this case, if it's talking about the use of TSST in order for manipulation to be successful, you got to go back in the passage and figure out what that was. Well, it's a test designed to induce acute or temporary stress. So this would have had to have been answer choice A. The participant must experience an emotional reaction to taking the TSST. If you don't have step 1, can you have step 2 in your cognitive appraisal theory? No, because how do you evaluate whether you can deal with the stress if you haven't actually had the stress? So think in the cognitive appraisal theory, that's your psychological adaptation. If you can respond to that induced stress. Good. Now, 16. This is your social cognitive theory. Social cognitive theory, attitudes are formed through observation of behavior, cognition, and environment. But what's self-efficacy? How do you guys remember self-efficacy? How do you guys remember self-efficacy? This is one that was weird for me. I always used to mess it up. If you're self-efficacy, then it's how we see oneself as being capable. You can do that. You believe that you can do that. A skill or a certain situation. Very good. So according to social cognitive theory, which of the following is true regarding self-efficacy? We have to look for an answer choice on whether or not we would believe that we could do that. Okay? So going through it, vicarious learning through modeling can help review one's self-efficacy. Here's my question. You might have missed this question the first go around. What's modeling? What's modeling? You're mimicking, right? Or you're going through something and trying to see one, do one, teach one. Sometimes we say that in medicine a lot, or in learning. You'll hear that in medical school and then in your residencies quite a bit. They always say if you see one and you do one, you can then teach one. But in modeling, do you have knowledge of past experience? Do you consciously have knowledge of that past experience? You would. In modeling, you would know though, right? Ranky, think if you're watching someone or you're mimicking someone, you've had that experience of observing them in the past, right? So if you always say, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Does that make sense? If they can do it, I can do it, then I'm going to start to believe that I'm capable of that certain skill or that certain situation. So that's why sometimes we say good practice makes perfect because you see it. Is that better, Ranky? Yep. So Zakaria, that's a great question. Why is it not A then? An individual's past successes are responsible for an individual's level of self-efficacy. Because it says in the first part of the question stem, according to the social cognitive theory, which says it's observation of that behavior, cognition, or environment. Does that make sense? Because think, you can, if you look at A, an individual's past successes are responsible, then yes, that A is true. That could improve your level of self-efficacy. But this is according to social cognitive theory. Better? That's a great question. That was a great wrong answer choice to go through. Excellent. Good. Good job, guys. Okay, two more questions we want to finish up here. I want to make sure we get to the last two. Sensory adaptation. Have we talked about sensory adaptation tonight? We did, right? I gave you guys the pants example. So diminished sensitivity to a stimulus. Well, look at this. According to sensory adaptation, what would happen to the taste buds if one ate a large amount of candy? So if you guys celebrated Easter, the Easter bunny just came recently. If you had got an Easter basket full of candy, by the time you eat the rest of that candy, do you really want to eat candy by the end of it? It's like gross, isn't it? You're like, man, I really love Starburst, but now that I've eaten 25 of them, I don't think that I want to eat any more Starburst for a while. So you're right. They end up becoming less sensitive, and the individual becomes less adept at tasting sweetness for a short amount of time. Now, if you wait a few days, you might have it a little bit, but that's kind of the idea. I think sensory adaptation is a good one to think back on, right? I love cheeseburgers, but I'm not going to eat 15 cheeseburgers. It's just going to taste gross after a while. Good. Now, 53. Okay. Last question here. We want to make sure we understand how this is being applied in context. So in 53, there's actually part of the passage here. And I'll show you. This is one where we can take a really quick shortcut here. So functional analysis, the study of the structure and function of each part of society. Right? The functional analysis. Which of the following best describes the increased access to media mentioned in the first paragraph? So in this passage, you would have had to have gone back. But look, it says in that first part, the increasing availability for tools for mass communication not only allows for increased access to media, but also creates expectations that impact social interactions. Okay? So if you have increased access to media, but it also creates expectation that impacts social interactions, then it says, which of the following best describes the increased access to media mentioned in the first paragraph? Well, it results, the function resulting from the increased availability for mass communication. I like that. Let's just make sure we run through B, C, and D. It results in the function of increasing the availability of tools for mass communication. Is that, what's wrong with B when you really look at it? B seems tempting, but we're asking about the functional analysis of something. So don't we just have to pull from the passage here? According to functional analysis, which the following best describes, we just read it. It's got to be A. It's a function resulting from. If we increase the availability of tools for mass communication, what's the function in each part of society? That it creates the expectations that impact social interactions. So if you didn't understand what functional analysis was, could you potentially be in trouble in this question? Which is a nice way to kind of finish up our session for tonight. Yeah, absolutely. Guys, what was the main takeaway from following 5 review of this psych section here? Main takeaway, which is actually a really good confidence booster from now until test day. So we worked really quick today. We worked through a lot of questions, but we really did that on purpose to show you guys the breadth of how much information's out there. Yeah, score some super easy points, which is a really quick way to improve your MCAT score. But remember the big picture here, guys. If you can just get a few more questions correct in each section, you're jumping scaled score points. Scaled score points, just jumping by a few, you're leapfrogging past thousands of applicants in the application process. Okay? So as I end every channel session, I want you guys to leave here a little bit more confident and a little bit more pumped up that you guys still have the hard work is really going to pay off. But remember, success is just when preparation meets opportunity. Okay? The MCAT is just one big opportunity, just a little ways around the corner. All right? Great job tonight, guys. Love having you guys. Hope to see you guys back here on the channel soon. All right? And remember, the hard work pays off. We got Rebecca coming up next with an MCAT channel edition of Electrons. I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and I hope to see you guys back here on the channel soon. All right? Those of you guys taking the April test dates, good luck, and we'll see you guys back here